In a burning anger thawed, in judgment turned compassion, in an unseen act of giving. Your glory, O God, is but your beauty in our sight. May your beauty turn our darkness into everlasting light. Amen. So today we begin on page 105, if you happen to be following in the book. And it's a subsection of this fourth chapter called Gospel Beauty. And so for the next few sessions, that's what we'll be focusing on. So trying to speak or write about beauty is like attempting to explain a joke. Once an explanation becomes necessary, it's already too late, the humor lost in the moment past. Throughout Western history, one of the most enduring and contested philosophical debates about beauty has been whether it is fundamentally subjective, that is to say, in the eye of the beholder, or objective, an aspect or quality of the object itself, apart from one's individual perception or interpretation of it. Of course, exclusive claims to either the subjective or the objective approach ultimately collapse in on themselves. If beauty were purely subjective, we would have no way of communicating anything substantial of our own experience of beauty to another. And yet, even while allowing for differences between cultural constructions, personal temperament, and individual aesthetics, there nevertheless remains a striking consistency across time and culture as to what we humans find beautiful. Who would contest the loveliness of a brilliant sunrise or remain indifferent while standing beneath the canopy of a redwood forest? On the other hand, beauty cannot be understood on a purely objective level. A telescope peering deep into the night sky cannot of itself appreciate the magnificence of the cosmos or be humbled by its vastness. Only the human subject gazing through the instrument can experience awe at what the telescope registers. Historically, these two poles between subjective and objective approaches to beauty have vacillated, sometimes with greater emphasis on one or another. The classical world into which Christianity was born could hardly understand itself apart from beauty. For the Greek philosophers, beauty was primarily understood as an objective quality expressed in outward forms of symmetry and proportion, harmony, and the coherence of many parts into a synthesized whole. The more perfect these qualities, the more inherently beautiful an object was perceived to be. This understanding of beauty gave rise to some of Europe's most magnificent cathedrals, to sculptures like Michelangelo's famous David, and to the mathematical symmetry that underlies our most beloved classical compositions. So let us pray. So the second reading continues today on page 105. The 18th century saw a turn toward a more subjective exploration of beauty in philosophers like David Hume and Immanuel Kant, even as the Industrial Revolution continued to further objectify and commodify beauty, which was, in a sense, to lose any real connection to it. Indeed, already in 1802, the English Romantic poet William Wordsworth criticized the world born of the Industrial Revolution as one that had become absorbed in materialism and had tragically distanced itself from nature. He writes this: "The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away, a sordid boon." Only in the past half century or so has Christianity seen a resurgence in the theology of aesthetics, as we see, for example, in Hans Urs von Balthasar. He lamented that by the 20th century, Western society had largely relegated beauty to a mere facade, a commodity that is to be marketed, controlled, objectified, or exploited. Thus, in contemporary society, it has become almost necessary to relearn how to perceive beauty in our lives. The modern resurgence of the Christian contemplative life has much to do with an aesthetic impulse, a quest for the beautiful in a world ever more bereft of it. If we are to be spiritually alive, fully actualized human persons, it is imperative that we bear witness to beauty and indeed embody and mediate it. This the contemplative shares in common with poets, artists, musicians, architects, mathematicians, and physicists, all of them compelled by the love of the beautiful. Songwriter and activist Phil Ochs was right to insist, in such an ugly time, the true protest is beauty. Let us pray then. Oh God, your beauty, like your wisdom, is elusive to those who seek to seize it, yet ever present to all who are wakeful, silent, still. Make me to know the stillness, the silence, the wakefulness of your ever-present beauty, that letting go of striving, you might seize me. Fill me with your wisdom. Shine through me your divine beauty, O God. Amen. So we take some time then to open the floor. Happy to receive your comments or questions, and a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time today. Glad you're here. So you have the floor. Betty, please, good morning.
Good morning. What came to me in thinking about beauty in nature was the Fibonacci sequence. A physicist told me about this years ago, and since I've learned it, it's a mathematical proportion of a spiral. The numbers 1 and 1 make 2, 2 and 1, 3. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 13. Think of a spiral. Mm-hmm. And it's everywhere in nature. I look at a rose and I can see that same sequence. And I look at a shell on the beach, especially the
nautical, right?
Yeah. It's everywhere. Pine cones from the top down. They're a Fibonacci sequence. And it's very objective beauty, but it just, so when I think about how the world is being destroyed all around us, there are still ways of finding beautiful things in nature. And it makes every walk something interesting for me because I can always find it. I find it in many plants as I walk along. And so I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Betty. It's beautiful. Yeah, the Fibonacci pattern I find not only beautiful in itself, but the fact that it's repeated so many places. It's all over the place. And so it's not even the pattern as it appears in a particular flower or pine cone or shell, which itself is beautiful in its symmetry, but the fact that you can see the link between that and so many other things through that pattern. It's quite stunning, actually. And there you see what I was addressing a bit in the paragraphs today, is the sense that predictable patterns and symmetry, when we can absorb them, or when we can recognize them, have a certain beauty that's mesmerizing, a structural beauty. Thank you for raising that. It indeed is beautiful. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning. When I was meditating, I was thinking about all of the different beauties that you had talked about, and they were mostly visual beauties. And I was thinking that there's so many other kinds of beauty. First was that I thought was oral beauty, with sounds, things that you hear. So music and song and things that we humans make, but also the beauty of crows and crickets, the wind in the trees. Then there's beauty of less physical things, more beauties of trust, of friendship, of simple gifts, of grace, of love, both from humans and from God, spiritual gifts. And I have this beautiful little prayer bracelet, and I went all the way around the prayer bracelet, and there were more things. There was more than enough to go all the way around. So it was a lovely thing. And then when the second reading came, it really expanded to include some of the things that I'd already been thinking about. So it was pretty amazing.
Thank you for that, Catherine. One of the things that strikes me is that when I'm recognizing beauty in such a plethora of things, whether it's sounds or sights or experiences or small intangible gifts, what is the commonality that's happening, that's arising with me, that I recognize beauty? Because those things seem so disparate, so different, and yet there feels, and I don't know if I can even name it other than to call it the recognition of beauty, but there's something that arises up as a response to those things that feels like there's a common denominator, a recognition of beauty, despite how vastly different those things are. And that's that sort of vacillation that I was, trying to very briefly summarize in the text today, between the objective and the subjective ways in which we come to know beauty. There's somehow, as much as we try to philosophize beauty or talk about it or define it, there's an elusive nature to it, and yet an unmistakable recognition when you encounter it, if you see it for what it is. So thank you for that, sort of putting that out there in such a broad way. Thank you. Let's see, Christine, please.
One of the things that that really gives me hope is this Fibonacci spiral. And Moravia wrote about this in his books on gnosis. And so he said that this is true also of social evolution as well as physical evolution. And so the pattern is to move forward and then make a turn and another turn until it looks like you're going in absolutely the opposite direction, which is what it feels like right now in our society. And then the turn comes around and there's a great input of force that then moves up to a whole new level.
Mm.
So that gives me hope in light of everything that's going on.
Well, how beautiful if we can indeed see that pattern in human progress. What a beautiful thing that would be to know. I'm struck by how many mathematicians, colleagues I've spoken to, say at USF, who can, string a series of numbers and letters and symbols on a chalkboard, across an entire room, which means absolutely nothing to me. I mean, truly nothing. And yet to them, it is this striking beauty because they understand what it implies about the nature of the universe or the quality of infinity or some concept like this that all gets expressed in these numbers. And how fascinated I am by what we might think of as a kind of cold or cerebral discipline is very often motivated within mathematicians by beauty and the beauty they see in how these numbers come to represent things that are often otherwise completely inexpressible. It's stunning. So let's hope that that formula that you point is indeed among us and that we're experiencing that force to a new level. That would be indeed a great boon.
I love when they say that they know something is true because it's so elegant.
Yeah, indeed, right. And that's, when you hear about the search for the grand theory of everything, they often evoke that very thing. We'll know it because of its elegance. And in its elegance, they mean its simplicity as well. The simple elegance of it will in itself speak its truth. Beautiful. There you see that connection too that I believe I'll be raising in the next week when we're together. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. That somehow I think that's what we encounter, that nebulous thing. When we encounter beauty, there's something that speaks true and rings true about it, that makes it feel beautiful or that we experience as beautiful. So thanks, Christine. Beautifully said. Nora, good morning. It's good to hear from you again.
Good morning, Father. Good morning, everybody. I'm speaking to you from Oaxaca, Mexico, where I have come for part of the year for the last 25 years. And this whole idea of beauty speaks to me here in a way that doesn't speak to me anywhere else. And I think it has to do with the people. And it has to do with people who are simple people and yet have such a beauty. And it is nobility beauty. It's not elegant beauty, it's noble beauty. And to give you an idea of that, I have a friend who every 12th of December, the Feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe, has a carpenter make the shape of a virgin in wood. And then we gather there and she has boxes of trims and fabrics and so on to make your own virgin, so to speak, out of this wooden frame. And so I'm going to show you the virgin I made 2 years ago when I was here. And she exemplifies, if you can see the face, she exemplifies what I find so noble and beautiful here. It is the face of an old woman with many wrinkles. And I see these women on the street during the day when I go out, and they are so beautifully amazing. Their little legs have many times rickets from, bold legs from not enough nutrition. And yet they are carrying, 25 pounds of tortillas in a basket on their head and walking the street. And I'm like, I'm moved to tears practically. when I see this, and I have a workman in front of where I live right now constructing, and I see them working with their hands in such a beautiful, noble way, and yet such hard work, really hard work, almost nothing electrical, you know, mixing cement by shovels. And, you know, I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, but I'm crying because just talking about it is just beautiful. I mean, I can't explain all of it fully, but beauty is just, I think what it, for me, the commonality is it enhances life.
Mhm.
It is an enhancement of life. And I feel here as a humble witness, my life is enhanced. And that's all I have to say.
Or thank you for that. You know, your tears speak as much as your voice, and maybe a way to, frame what I think you're getting at in some ways is that beauty is what remains after everything else is stripped away. It is the essence of life. And when we encounter it, it's because we've cut through all of the crap, all of the dross, all of the layers that are meaningless. And it has a kind of capacity to move us to tears, to expand our heart, to move us into deep gratitude and appreciation. And I think that is why I see it so important in the contemplative life. It is a reclamation of that kind of encounter, to see through what is false, what is fabricated, what's commodified, and to be always in touch with and connected to that beauty. And it doesn't mean, unlike the way, beauty in our society wants to tell us, it's not that kind of surface beauty. It's the beauty of hard work and a simple life, and the nobility of dignified work that you're witnessing, for example, in these people that you encounter on a daily basis. There's something real about all of that and authentic. And I think we're moved to that deeply. I had an experience of that in Turkey. Fernando and I were traveling once, and we got onto the most crowded minibus, and there was just a parents there with two children, and carrying, jugs of milk and groceries, and on this crowded bus trying to manage these two little children. And we were just packed in like sardines, and my heart just broke for them because I saw how hard life was for them. And yet they exuded a certain happiness, a certain simplicity of joy of being with their kids, and in what most middle-class Americans would have seen as just an abysmal, crowded, hot bus and there was joy. It was part of their life. And there was something about, when you explained to me this encounter of the folks you're encountering there in Mexico, something resonated with me about how that family stuck in my mind. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Sylvia, good morning.
Good morning. I'm still in bed, so I don't have my video on.
You're still beautiful, Sylvia. Doesn't matter.
Anyway, and this gathering is beauty. This, all of us and you and what we're doing evokes beauty. So what came to my mind while I was meditating was a scene from a movie called American Beauty that came out years ago and won actually the Academy Award for the Best Picture that year. And there was this scene where these two very troubled teens, the boy and the girl, he was becoming so vulnerable with her and sharing his truth. And he said, "I want to show you the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." And he showed the video of a plastic bag up against a dirty cement wall that the wind had captured, and the bag was turning and twisting and like a ballet, and then it was spiraling up, and then it was floating like a jellyfish, and then it was moving, and both of them were enraptured by this plastic piece of trash bag against a dirty cement wall being created into a ballet by the wind. And I was remembering how shocked and struck and then moved I was by this, as I entered into his perception of this as beauty. And so then I thought, okay, what to me is a sentence that would encapsulate my experience of beauty? And so I wrote this, and it's like a palindrome. It works both ways. This could be from my perception of I'm experiencing beauty, but it also could be from the object or the subject of the beauty. So this could be the tree experiencing me experiencing the tree, or the sunset, or the person, or the act, or the piece of music. So what I wrote, oh, beloved, to behold, to sense, you see and hear me from across the multitude. We merge, and in this seeing, in this intimacy, we are reborn, beautiful, divine, Christ light incarnate, uniting and arising as you and me.
Thanks, Sylvia.
And so that could apply to anything, including a plastic bag moved by the wind, the plastic from the degrading dinosaur bones, and God knows how many processes and miles, and the cement, and this camera, and these two children. It's everywhere if we have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. Incredible. Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sylvia. And thank you for putting that in such a beautiful, poetic way. When we get too stern in our contemplative practice, it's important that it's really about, even as you're sharing, as Nora kind of connected, it's about just letting go of everything and getting to the essence of life, which itself is beauty. And so it's a process of reclaiming beauty, really. And thank you. You've done that very well. Carol, good morning.
Okay, I shouldn't have to go after Sylvia reading a poem. But okay, being a science person again, I remember we did in college the human cadavers, and I remember when we were exploring, I looked up at all the students around the body that I was around, and I just said, how can you not believe in God? I mean, because I guess science people, we see patterns and it makes sense and it registers, and God makes sense to me. And just like the Fibonacci thing, you see patterns in nature. And ever since we did the retreat with you, Father, about nature being the big book, I had always had a sense of nature echoing God, but now I'm looking for it. And you see it everywhere, that right. God is winking at us saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And there's a sense of not control, but a sense of order. But I was going to say two funny stories. Being from the East Coast, I went to a West Coast quilting conference with a bunch of East Coast people. And the East Coast people, we do patterns in our quilts, and they're very beautiful. And the Amish, we get out there to the Californians, and everything was rusty buses and all these kind of strange things. And it was so funny because the East Coast people, we were like, are we in the Emperor's New Clothes story? Because we just didn't see the beauty that the Californians were picking up. They were like, a woman gave a whole hour talk on rusty buses and their beauty. And I was like, what is going on here? The other thing was, my mother and I went to a piano, Andre Watts, and the whole first half was Baroque. And it was Mozart and Beethoven, and it was beautiful. And I was beside myself. We get outside at intermission, and I say to Mom, do you like it? Do you like it? And she goes, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, oh, because my mother plays piano and was a good piano player. Well, the second half was all the abstract stuff, the Russians and the this and the that. I'm bored out of my mind, and my mother is gripping her chest. She goes, don't you feel the waves crashing on the shore? Don't you feel it? And I'm like, no, I don't feel that. So the point is what I was thinking was, how each of us find beauty subjectively, and sometimes it's influenced by culture, and sometimes it's influenced by education, and sometimes it's influenced by what we've been told is beautiful. And it's so I have a desire to peel back that and see the rusty bus. But then the second thing is just that it made me think the beauty of God, that we all find our own little solitary journey of beauty to the source of God, and the other person's path isn't going to take us there. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the flower with the smell for the bee, that they know to go to the flower. It's sort of these little beautiful things that Betty was talking about that grab our attention, and then we follow it, and it brings us back to God. So I think it's a beautiful, again, there's a pattern and an order there through our own individual brains. NPR said that that if you play music for a baby, the baby reacts to Mozart, that they are probably a math science brain, because there's order.
So
the note that
mathematics.
you expect to hear is the note you will hear. My mother is the abstract, English and that kind of stuff, liberal arts, because the surprise, and for somebody like me, I don't want the surprise. I want to know what's happening. So I find that fascinating too, the way our brain is made and how
Right.
we're different.
Well, and I think too, to thank you for that, Carol. It's beautifully said, and that points clearly to that distinction between the objectivity of beauty and the subjectivity of beauty. For those who are unaware, for example, even Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, begins with what might on first appearance seem just like a boring list of unpronounceable names, mostly from the Old Testament, which is his genealogy of the record of Jesus. But when you follow the pattern that's there, he basically presents 3 repeating patterns of 14 generations. And within that pattern, the 14th name in the pattern is King David, and David's name in Hebrew numerology amounts to 14. So there's this cycle of patterns where he's trying to tell us that in this predictability, he's not interested in fact a genealogy that can be relied upon, because it can't. It's just factually incorrect. It's impossible for him to capture what he's tried to do. But what it's really trying to do is to show the predictability that in patterns we recognize the hand of the divine in creation. And all of these patterns for Matthew lead ultimately to the birth of Christ. And that's how he begins his birth narrative. So it's interesting how we do seek those patterns. And if you're just reading that and don't see the pattern, you might think this is just a boring list of names. But the moment you come to recognize the pattern, suddenly the beauty of it becomes real. And so I think we can be taught beauty by understanding the patterns that lie beneath things that might otherwise feel random to us. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And when you do, it's a big surprise of, wow, there is order here. And
Yeah.
it wasn't the Daniel's prophecy. It was like 7 times 49 minus 7 or whatever, the 7 times 70. It was when Jesus walked. It was an exact prediction of when Jesus came into Jerusalem on the donkey.
Well, that some would argue
that's to be argued about that. Okay.
but in apocalyptic type literature, yes, we do see a lot of patterns for sure. It's what makes it interesting. Thanks, Carol. I appreciate that so much. Richard, please. Richard, you're still muted.
You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? Oh, Nora, to make your own virgin, to strip away every objection that I used to separate myself from love, to subject myself to the lashes that I interpret from life, which I use to separate, to subject, to enter, to see as Christ saw the beauty beneath all that appears, to see all that is false and yet begin anew in the moment, to get past my shame when I don't, See the beauty beneath when I am reviled and push away. Because that too is a separation that keeps me from love. Thank you for this community and for the love you have written, my brother.
Thank you, Richard. As always, beautiful. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning, everybody. Gosh, this is a very sensitive topic that is very deep to everybody, and it's very obvious. Thank you for including that in your book, Father.
Of course.
As I was reflecting on beauty and what everyone else has shared, I think something that ties us all together is it's a glimpse of God. We see God as being perfection. That's where we all came from. And so when we see patterns in nature or in art, and I put myself, sitting and watching a beautiful ballet and the things that, some of these dancers can do with their bodies, or in art and painting, and how, the combination of colors, all of it is just glimpsing at God and what God has given us through talent or through our eyes, and this desire to be surrounded by this sense of perfection, which nature is a creation of God. So that's probably why so many, nature mysticism and so many people are so moved by nature, is because that is, I think, to some extent as close as we can feel, just surrounded by God. And then through what people are able to create through their art, in some ways, just glimpses of what we feel within. And then the concept, the dichotomy of the subjective perspective versus the objective, sitting and watching or looking at a painting, there's something that can capture everybody. And there's a unified feeling, which is the objective. But then within that feeling, as I think some other people were mentioning, there is that subjectivity based on our own experiences. We hear an opera and everyone is moved in some way, unified. But at the same time, there's a subjectivity. We're unified for different reasons that, our personal experiences have led us there. And even the humility that people have mentioned, the humility of life and people, there's something so beautiful and perfect within that, simplicity. And I think of Thomas Merton, in this, he was captured by Gethsemane and in those hills of Kentucky, and just wanted to surround himself with it, and went to a hermitage and just wanted to be engulfed in that. Yet I think it was David who mentioned last time his mystical experience was in downtown Louisville, So it's beautiful. And obviously this topic moves a lot of people. So thank you for including that.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Beautiful reflections. I don't know if you're aware, on December 11th, we're doing a Zoom session with Jonathan Montaldo on Thomas Merton, and it'll be 2 brief presentations and then an interview between me and Jonathan, who will be visiting us at the time. And Merton really did know how to capture that sense, that essence of beauty in all things. And if you really track so much of his teaching, he really brings out, even in his notion of abandoning each moment to God, it's this giving over of oneself to whatever is in the moment, that what you're talking about, that simplicity. And there's something profoundly beautiful that arises out of that when we just give ourselves to the moment so often. And I think you're right about the sort of universality of the way it touches people. I almost couldn't help but include this, reflection on beauty, which you'll see will continue in the weeks ahead, because it strikes me as, again, as I talked about in the readings today, the thing that seems so natural and so real and so ever present, and yet the sort of global market economy has seemed to mask or commodify or cover, where if you look at people's lives, we're not seeing the kind of beauty that Richard was singing about and Nora was experiencing and Sylvia was writing her poem about. It's just we're just living on this surface. And I recently spoke to my students, just totally as a footnote in one of my lectures, about vocation, another topic we've talked about in this book, about being not what you do, but who you are in the world, and how you really have to search out that sense of your own beauty and how you present. And from that, you will know joy in what you do and the dignity of your work. This was I was shocked at the amount of emails that followed in the next 2 days from my students who said, you need to have a class on this. We'd all sign up for this class, and I thought, wow, that we have to reteach people, our youth, that, which to me feels just so natural. So anyway, I'm beginning a class on that to try to walk students through the notion, how do we reflect theologically on the meaning of vocation and what that looks like? It's the beauty in that.
I think just like you mentioned in contemporary times, this materialism, and that I think that's hard about beauty as well, is that it has become a sense of commodity. If you're not in tune with an inner spirit, how do you separate beauty from being something that's within and a connection to God from being something that's just entertainment and for one's own pleasure?
Right.
And it's hard too. You think of the artist and how do you go about creating this sense of beauty without, in some sense, attaching yourself to your ego? So that it's a interesting, and of course that's referring to art mostly, but it's an interesting question.
Indeed.
I know my husband and I have that discussion.
Yeah, well, Merton, you raised Merton, and he has an extended essay on beauty, or at least how meditation and contemplation goes beyond what we normally think of it as Lectio Divina or saying our, centering prayer word, into the reflection on art and music and nature. And he really expands what contemplative practice looks like. As you pointed out, it's rare that we can find ourselves so deeply in touch with the divine when we're but in nature. And he really looks at that in one of his essays. You might be familiar, but anyway, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's so universal and yet so elusive. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, thank you for your comments this morning. And good morning, Penny.
Yes, so much wonderful things have been said this morning. I want to reflect a little bit on music. I've had a most amazing experience this week of attending, in one case, the San Francisco Symphony orchestral rehearsal, and a piece written by a young man. It's a trombone concerto. It's not a musical instrument you would normally associate with concertos, it's kind of something that's in the background mostly, but as a featuring instrument. And the amazing quality he has of, first of all, playing it, but also as I reflect on the ability to experiment and innovate and just, it was a startling and wonderful piece. And then last night I was at the Oakland Symphony and heard a performance of the Beethoven Symphony No. 3, which is called the Eroica. And a guest conductor from Taiwan, woman, and the way that performance affected me, she was full of energy. She was dancing through this as a conductor, performing it without a score. And I realized that so much of the beauty of that piece was also the tragedy of his life, of Beethoven's life. There was a time when he wanted to commit suicide, and because he was in such despair about losing his hearing, and yet he stayed with it and created these incredible works for us. And this idea of beauty, the stillness of beauty, this music is overpowering. The tragedy and the suffering and the drama and the quietness and the stillness is all in it. And so this word enfolding, enveloped, you are taken into it and you lose yourself in it, and you observe the movement of all these performers working together. And she was a very powerful conductor. And it was, I've listened to much Beethoven in my life, but sometimes it's more than just listening. It becomes something that transports you. And my friend who was with me said, I almost forgot to breathe because it was so immense and so tragic and so beautiful at the same time. And so I think music has this powerful effect that we can listen, but at the same time, it goes in through our head and our heart. All of us is taken over, and it's this sense of awe, and we are truly, when we're listening and transformed by it, people were almost still at the end because it was such a powerful experience. I find that as I grow older, I am much more drawn to really understanding music and listening to it in a new way. And I think it's because it's so, the beauty, not only of the composition, but the performance, but the collective experience of sharing this, both with the musicians and I play no instruments, but I love music. And I think this awareness that music and the structure of it, what you were talking about, the mathematical structure and the classical structure, but in the performance, that is transcended. You don't hear, it's not rote, it's inspired. And so I just wanted to share that as we're talking about art and music.
Thanks, Penny. I want to go to that concert. It sounds absolutely breathtaking. And I think you're right. There's something, I think in the next few paragraphs, I say something to the effect of where you can't read musical notes from Beethoven on the page and say you've been to the symphony. I mean, you've got to hear that performance. There's a big difference between a blueprint and then walking into a three-dimensional home that blueprint represents. It's just a different experience. One is two-dimensional, one is three-dimensional, but amazingly how we intuit, even if we don't realize it, I think in that beauty, that kind of mathematical connection or link or something that feels interconnected. And even just to see such a large group of people in the orchestra moving together, coordinating these very complex instruments that have to be, at just the right time and just the right everything is in itself just astounding in our capacity to do that as humans. I mean, it's unbelievable. So thank you for that. Sounds absolutely stunning. So Elizabeth, please. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for bringing in the English Romantic poets. I've been returning to them regularly, as you can see. That's my book.
Yeah, very much so.
For over 50 years. And there are 5 lines from a poem by Wordsworth that really resonate with what we've been experiencing today. And he wrote, "It is a beauteous evening, calm and free. The holy time is quiet as a nun, breathless with adoration. The broad sun is sinking down in its tranquility. Then gentleness of heaven broods o'er the sea." So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking about the English Romantic poets some more, because I return to them for beauty. Maybe not every day, but most days.
It's funny, Elizabeth, you say that. When I was an undergraduate at St. Bonaventure University in upstate New York, I wanted to major in theology, and my parents basically said, "Well, what are you going to do with a theology degree? Like, how are you going to eat?" And so they all but really required me to become a different major. So I chose English literature, and then every possible class I had as an elective, I filled in with theology. I almost had as many credits for theology as if I had majored. But when we got to the Romantics and to the Transcendentalists, I couldn't get enough of them. And I kept writing all of these papers. And my English professors were saying, "Oh, for God's sake, just become a theology major. It's so clear to us." This is weird. But I so resonated with these, the beauty of their nature mysticism and their connectedness. They really are a class by themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful. So yeah, I have an affinity for them, which is why they peek in and out of the book here and there. So thanks for that. And good morning, Sue.
Yeah, good morning. Some months ago, someone was raving about Spotify, and I thought, "Oh, I'm never going to use that." And I'm so grateful that it came to me, because it sent me music. And there's just a very simple, beautiful song, and it's called "Let Your Beauty Shine in Me, Lord. Let Your Beauty Shine in Me, Lord." And sometimes I listen to it over and over again. And when I heard your readings today and your beautiful prayers, which often make me just cry, then it spoke to me of 2 things. Like the word "let," it made me think about consenting as part of centering prayer. And how can, really it seems crazy on some level, but it still seems to be, it's my choice whether I let God's beauty shine in me and whether I let myself see God's beauty. So there was the thing about that point about consenting to beauty, and that also involves me letting go and asking the Holy Spirit to help me let go of the unbeautiful things I've made up about myself. And the other thing feels obvious. It's about relationship. And even though I don't like the idea of separation, but it feels like there's, to appreciate beauty, there seems to be like the need for two things, but it's about the relationship that allows the beauty.
Indeed, that's one of the things, Sue, I love about Trinity. When the church was confronted with the possibility of duality in God, Father and Son, they didn't bring them together by abolishing both. They added a third. And so we have Trinity. And so in a sense, you have triunity. It's the unity that's born of the relationship itself, that love becomes the unity. And many theologians have even talked about we should best define the Spirit as the love between the Father and the Son. It is actually becomes its own entity, its own thing, if you want to say. And that's such a beautiful concept, that is relationality is the essence of our unity, not duality, but connection. It's quite nice when you explore that a little deeper. But I feel your passion around that, and I share it. You know, how do we deal with, on the one hand, lover and beloved, the perceiver and the object of beauty, if we can call it that, and then the unity that emerges from that is its own thing, that eradicates the duality and makes the lover and beloved one, the eye of the beholder and the beheld one. It's beautiful, right? And
yeah, there was a story. I can't remember all the details, but it's and it doesn't really matter. But it was I think his name was Krishna Das, the singer, and he was telling a story about his early experience with his guru and someone that came to the ashram. And anyway, there was a question. The guru said, "Go meditate," and the guy said, and he was talking about being like Christ, and he said, "How did Christ meditate?" And seemingly there was a long period of silence, and then the guru almost was crying, and he said he lost himself in love. And I just think that's so beautiful, to be lost in love.
Exactly. Isn't that stunning? Right. You're right. Beautifully said. Thank you. Very nice. Let's see. So Martha, please, we'll give you last word, and then we'll look at some practice from last week, and I'll share a practice for the coming week.
Hi, thank you. This conversation, reflection on beauty actually had me thinking about God as the divine artist, and how perhaps God delights in the beauty of everything that God has created, and how we are called to see as God sees. These are just thoughts that came up, that, you know, as human beings, even when we're not at our best, that God continues to love us and perhaps see the beauty of possibility in us. And again, in each one of us as a unique creation of God, I also thought, I wonder how God delights in the unique relationship or spiritual journey that we each have with God. So my thoughts were more about God delighting in the beauty of each one of us and of all creation, and how we are called to try to see that same beauty as God sees. So
yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And I think that one of the things, Martha, that I have relished in my own practice is coming to a deeper awareness of that notion, exactly as you said, of God delighting, of the both what Sue said was talking about and the poem that Sylvia shared all has to do with the unity that comes about between the perception of love and being perceived as lovable, as infinitely an incarnation of love. And the notion that God delights in us is so foreign to so much of our spiritual vocabulary, and yet I think so authentic to what Jesus is trying to tell us in the gospel, that God delights in us. It's really quite stunning. I years ago gave a sermon about Forrest and about that my dog, who I'm absolutely head over heels for, and just how much I delight in him, even when he's doing things that are mischievous or misbehaving. The transparency of it all, the innocence of it, is so movingly beautiful to me. Because I see what his little mind is thinking and what he's trying to get away with and how he's trying to cajole me into another treat. And it's so transparent that I'm being manipulated by this little critter, and he's doing it intentionally, and it's fabulous. I mean, it's just beautiful that he can do that. And I usually give in, by the way. So he knows that he's trained me well, but there's something about that experience and that encounter of delight that really speaks to me of how transparent we must be to the divine heart and mind who sees us for what we are and what we're doing. And even when we're being mischievous and manipulative and trying to be in denial of who we really are, there's something even delightful in that, because of its beauty and innocence to God who loves us beyond all of it. So something to be said as we reflect on all of these things around beauty. So thank you, Martha, for that insight. I want to just share briefly as we move to a talk of practice. It was 104 weeks ago today that my father last attended this session. And it was, he passed away that day later on. And so that was very different. We're coming up upon what is the 24th of November this year. But it was the 19th of November of that year in 2019 that I last saw him and was able to hug him. I was in a parking lot in Dixon, California at a Mary's Pizza Shack. It was actually the repast of a funeral of a father of a parishioner here. And of course, I had no idea it would be the last time that I saw him. But when you think about patterns, that awareness of knowing it was the second anniversary that I last embraced him and saw him, that was very heavy on my mind and heart in the last 24 hours. And in the meantime, here at St. Columba's, I've had a project I've been working on a memorial bell tower that began as in memory of him. And the bell recently was shipped here from Cincinnati. It's absolutely beautiful, and it has an engraving in his memory. And that bell had to be lifted onto a support structure that will sustain it and stabilize it on the roof. And this was all happening in our parking lot with a forklift yesterday. But it struck me that within that same hour that I 2 years ago had said goodbye to him, this bell in his name was being raised and attached to this structure. And there was something about that pattern, about that, be it providence or coincidence, that in that same hour, marking a 2-year anniversary, this bell in his honor was being raised and sort of embracing this structure that will hold it in perpetuity on this tower. Was very moving to me. And it was partly because of the day and the anniversary and the hour that it implied. So sometimes I have to wonder if when we look at these patterns and see of all the days, of all the years, of all the months that bell could have been connected, to think of it within that hour was just so beautiful and meaningful to me. And you wonder if there isn't something orchestrated at times to speak to us about our deep connection. So I share that with you as I remember my father with a heavy heart today. So let me call up I'll start with our practice that I'd like to suggest for the coming week. And then we'll look at what I offered for this week and see how many of you did your homework. This week, I'd like to suggest something simple. Offer a sustained meditation on the beautiful, whether it's a work of art, a musical score, a poem, a landscape. From the conversations we're having already today, I can see most of you are already engaged in that, which is wonderful. And what if the glory, that is to say, the beauty of God, is revealed to you by simply attending to what is before you? So I'm asking you to choose an object of meditation, a subject of meditation, if you will, something you want to just reflect on that's beautiful. And just sit with it, be intentional about it. And what's revealed to you about God's beauty. I always tell my students, whenever you hear in the Bible the glory of God, you should think the beauty of God. That's what it's referring to. So let's look at last week's practice then and see if we want to have some discussion on that in our final moments today. So I'm asking you to meditate. I asked you to meditate upon an attachment you possess and track it throughout the week. Notice where and when and how that attachment manifests. And I specifically wanted you to not try to fight it or resist it, because that's a whole different dynamic, but rather just shine the light of consciousness on it. Just be attentive, be aware, right? Notice it. And each time you notice it, simply say, I see you. And then I wondered how that sustained practice might begin to change the dynamic of this attachment in you. And this is coming from the previous couple paragraphs before today's reading that was somewhat alluded to today. You know, beauty is what remains when everything else is sort of stripped away. And this is giving you an opportunity to look at whatever attachments are preventing you from knowing, encountering, experiencing beauty by simply shining a light and letting it dissipate under that light. And it's sort of the precursor to what I've asked you to do this week, which is then to be with beauty itself. So I wonder if any of you have taken up the challenge or would like to share your experience. I'll go ahead and stop the share so that we can see one another. Just see if any of you want to share or if we want to just sit in silence for a few moments. All righty. So I do want to make a quick announcement before we close today. Next week, as you probably know, at least in the United States, is our holiday Thanksgiving. And I will actually be traveling a week from today and unable to be present. So I want to just propose that for the Thanksgiving holiday, we maybe just take a little break. And I suspect many of you may be traveling for the holiday and so forth. And if that's okay with you, I know that sometimes when I'm not here, people attempt to sort of corral and promote a session with others presenting, which of course I have no problems if that's what the group would like to do. But I propose, since I'm not able to be here and it is the holiday and many of us may also be traveling, that we take a break and then come back 2 weeks from today. And Richard, I see your hand.
This is Paloma.
Oh, hi, Paloma. I never know.
Are we past the point where we can share?
We're never past the point where we could share. Actually, that's not entirely true. They would kick us out of here at 9 o'clock my time or our time, but go right ahead.
Okay. So the assignment about beauty, I wanted to respond on that.
Oh, sure.
We have this little stained glass window of a tree that I love and got in a secondhand store and gave to Richard as a symbol of sort of our relationship and love. And I love this stained glass window. And it's a tree, and it's sort of a tree beside a river. And so that was sort of my object. And what I loved in seeing it is that it's a window, so you also see through it. And the trees are beyond it. So I also see out into our yard with the trees. And what I wanted to share is that in contemplating this object, some of the layers that started unfurling were both the original intention in sharing it and giving it to him, and the experiences that we've had in nature. And because of the tree, it kind of unfurled that memory. But then also I noticed just the intricacy of how it's made, which I haven't ever really done. But in slowing down and really looking at it, the type of glass that's in different parts of it, and how there's a beveled clear glass around the outside. And then it connected me to the maker of it too, like what was in the person's heart and mind who made this, who never knew where it would go to, and how it keeps unfurling over time. Every act of beauty, how it resides in the beholder and keeps, almost like a tree, keeps growing and multiplying. And then looking through it out to the trees. So it was an expression about trees, and then looking out into the nature, just seeing and remembering how I wouldn't even be here if the trees weren't keeping on breathing, so that I'm able to breathe. And just how in this time of, I can't breathe, being such a poignant phrase, these trees are remembering me even when I don't remember them. And thank you.
Paloma, thank you for that. And I know you're familiar with the premises here at St. Columba's. And for those of you who visit, I would encourage you in the back of our nave, we have a stairway that leads up to most of our retreat rooms. And at the top of that stairway is a stained glass window of the Blessed Mother of Mary facing what is Tamales Bay and the hills behind it. And Paloma, you may well have seen that and remember that. What's beautiful about that is exactly the sort of experience you're talking about in that window. You can see her, but the glass is light enough you can also see through her, and the whole image of the bay and the mountains and the hillsides and the trees coming through that image. And it always just speaks to me of the divine feminine on some deep level, and the connection between Mary as sort of the mother of all, and what we often think of as, as Mother Earth and creation, and the beauty of her capacity to give life and to birth Christ in our midst. Jessica was talking earlier about it's hardly a place we can go beyond nature to really come close to God. And that window doesn't block what's beyond it, but sort of translates it through this beautiful image of Mary. It's really stunning. If you haven't been here yet, when you come, please look at that window. It's a beautiful window to meditate on. And for those of you who are familiar and haven't quite made that connection, next time you're here, I would invite you to do that. It's absolutely beautiful. So thank you, Paloma, for that. Yeah. Oh, nice. There it is.
And also, I put my father when he was going in for surgery, and as some of you inquired, so this is a double sharing. Thank you for your prayers for my dad.
Of course. Thank you for that. Well, I want to thank you all then for being here with me today, and for this lovely reflections that you've all shared on beauty. I'm deeply moved, and I'm grateful, as always, to be a part of this group. So once again, we'll meet 2 weeks from today then. And I wish you all a very blessed Thanksgiving and a very blessed week ahead, or 2 weeks ahead. And as always, I bid you Benum Christinet. I greet Christ in you and send you with my blessing in the name of the 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. So go in the peace of Christ and in the joy of the Spirit. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.